Welcome to Police K9 Radio. Rich, what's going on?
Detection's going on tonight. We got a lot of weird shit going on in the detection world.
It's getting crazy out there.
Idaho's leading the charge with weirdness. Fentanyl's a problem. You're playing a xylophone, xylazine,
yeah,
like that's going on.
Things have changed since you left law enforcement. It's only been a year and a half.
I've been out of police work for a year, and all kinds of weird stuff's going on. Apparently, your dog can trespass in a car now. There's all
a little 602 action on the car with a dog. The dog's guilty. You have to write him a ticket. Yeah. The DA won't file because it's a misdemeanor in California. So or Chicago. We're going to talk about that in a minute. What's going on?
It's crazy. I have a bunch of young dogs at the house right now. I'm walking them by cars, and every time they look at a car, I'm
hooey, little stim with the e-collar. Nay,
I don't want them looking at cars. It might offend the car. Yeah,
things are changing fast. Our dogs are racist. Our dogs are trespassers. Our dogs are committing all these crimes out there now. Man, what's going on with that?
Ethical dilemma with each one of those dogs. We have to start over at ground zero with those guys. Speaking of training, before we get going on, again, we have HITS sponsoring us. We're really proud to have HITS as one of those.
It's a great conference.
Yeah, great conference. We talk about it every time that we get on here, but we are looking forward. We're both going to head out to HITS. It's kind of coming up.
Go up to Sedona and down around Scottsdale. Oh, we're going to go to the conference too.
Right.
Okay.
And your Vortex.
And the Vortex.
August 15th through 18th. HITS. Really recommend that anybody who can, especially we're out here on the West Coast. It obviously goes back and forth every year. Last year, I think it was out in Florida. This year, it's on our side of the world, which means Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, California. All of us on the West Coast can head out to HITS. It's an easier transition. It's pretty cheap to fly into Phoenix. It's one of Southwest hubs, so that's an easy flight.
Yeah.
HITS
as long as our computer systems are working.
Oh, man. HITS is going to have 60 classes out there. They're going to have 35 instructors. It's going to be at the
65, right?
60 classes.
60 classes.
35 instructors.
Okay, yep.
It's a lot. It's a lot of information. We talked about it last time. Anytime you can go out there and get some information, don't have to agree with it. When you have 35 instructors, the chance of you leaving with something new in your repertoire and your tool belt is pretty damn good.
Giving a lot of stuff away.
A lot of stuff away. That giveaway night is a good time.
Yeah.
Don't sign up for an early class the next day.
No, you got to go. You got to go. You're there for classes. You got to go. Be there 15 minutes early, ready to take notes. That's what I say. No, but honestly,
is that what you say?
That's what I say. That's not what I do. But honestly, when you go to these conferences, and we've talked about this before, like you go with the intent of like, if I can go, and this is my intent, if I can just pick up 2 or 3 things to bring back to the K9 unit, it's well worth it. And with 35 instructors, I mean, there's going to be more than that to take home. So you got to get out of your pond. You got to get out there. You got to see what's going on in this industry. It is changing rapidly, daily. And that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about coming up. But what else we got going on?
Again, we have INUKSHUK. Really proud to have INUKSHUK on as a sponsor. They're doing good stuff out there. Personal situation, we have a Schnauzer at home. And we have another Schnauzer on the way.
Oh, sorry.
So I just ordered a giant Schnauzer. We're going to try and do some protection work with the giant Schnauzer. But we have a young Schnauzer who's got some allergies. And as a pet dog trainer, we have a lot of clients who come in and their dogs are allergic to chicken or beef or something like that. So INUKSHUK has their marine formula where all the proteins are sourced from marine animals, fishes.
Dolphins.
No.
Not dolphins?
No,
okay,
not dolphins,
well, all right.
No, so really excited to have that food out there available to people
100%.
who have all kinds of problems. Our dog, her coat glows. Not that I care, but my wife really thinks that that's important. And she's a really shiny dog. Mm-hmm. She loves her food. It's pretty awesome to have that option.
You love that dumb little dog.
She's a cool little dog.
I see you all over the place with that dog.
With her beard. She got the little beard.
Yeah.
Going. So now we're going to have a giant. We're going to have a standard. They both, obviously are going to be eating the marine stuff because my wife only has the best for the dogs. There's nights where I have toast and the dogs are eating, INUKSHUK marine. So
no, and on a serious note, I mean, most of our handlers are feeding INUKSHUK. We've been using this for 2 years now. This isn't like all of a sudden they knock on our door and like we're going to talk about it. Like we've fully bought into their food. We've seen great results. We have numerous dogs that wouldn't keep weight on or had, diarrhea issues, right. and INUKSHUK has been amazing for them, and it's something we believe in. So if you are having any dietary issues, or even if not, you want to feed a great food that is made for the working dog, it's INUKSHUK's your go-to.
Yeah, I get 2 pallets a month. 2 pallets a month right now that we're getting, and some of those by half a pallet are going out to agencies directly that have signed their dogs over completely to using that food. So it's
awesome.
Good stuff. We're proud to have them as a sponsor.
Yep, 100%.
So we have on tonight.
We have Mike Kmiecik, and Mike is no stranger to the show. Mike has been around with us, and I've actually had him out here to California to do the legal update. And I tell you what, if you guys are in need of a legal update, and I guarantee you are, because if you haven't done anything in the last year or two, things are changing rapidly, more than I can ever remember. Like for a while there, it was like, okay, we're going to talk about Robinette v. Barnes again. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, that's cases in the 1990s. And that's not the case, I think, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Our industry is changing. You got to be a professional. You better be changing with it. And I think, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So you, as a canine handler, need to be better than most in knowing what the actual current case law is. Mike comes in onto the scene. He's been doing this for a while now. He took over from Terry Fleck years ago. And from somebody that's had him out here, I will tell you this. What impressed me the most about Mike is where he goes, he hits the local case law, concentrates on your state, on your circuit, and it's tailored to, the area in which you work. So, we're not sitting there listening to all the Florida case law, and God knows there's a lot of case law coming from you fools in Florida. I don't know what you're doing out there half the time. No, there's a lot of good handlers in Florida, but there's been a lot of stuff coming out of there. And so if it impacts your agency, then he'll talk about it. Otherwise, he's not wasting your time with it.
Got a pretty high compliment the other day. Were you in Redding not too long ago in Northern California?
I was, yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah, I got a text while you were there, and it said, "Hey, you know this Mike Kmiecik guy? He's too fucking smart to be a cop."
There you go.
I don't know about that.
How high are we setting that bar? Hey, I'm saying that as a private cop myself. Okay, so I can say that kind of shit. Don't get mad at me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mike,
Well, that's great. I
thanks.
appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, it's good stuff. And we
I
said the
vouch
same
for that.
thing.
Yeah.
When we were in class, we're like, holy, how does he keep track of everything?
And that's a lot of the
I think
comments.
the biggest thing, like Gregg just talked about, is doing the regional stuff. You live in Chicago. You know exactly what's going on out here with Ninth Circuit stuff. Tonight, we're going to focus a little bit on Idaho. None of us live in Idaho, but I guarantee that you have the answers to what's going on there, because the last thing we want to do is have a bunch of egregious trespass violators of canines.
Add it to the list of the crimes our dogs are committing.
I know.
So Mike, for those that are been living in a cave, can you give a brief history on you, and then talk about what you're doing, and then get into some of this stuff to help our handlers out?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. Be back here with you guys. We have some important topics to talk about today. Yeah, so I'm the owner of Sheepdog Guardian Consulting. I run a K9 case law website. It's the most comprehensive out there. I took it over from Terry Fleck, as you said, after his passing, and just kind of been building upon that. We do our discipline specific and jurisdictional specific canine legal updates across the United States. Been very, very busy. I also do expert witness consulting in federal and state court on these canine related issues, more specifically related to the use of force side of things. But so that's kind of who I am. I'm not an attorney. I'm a police officer who, I just want to get that information out there based on my training and experience of not just being a canine handler for coming up on 19 years now, and a law enforcement officer for 27 years, but also my experience in dealing with the prosecutors, defense attorneys, in these expert witness cases and things like that. So that's who I am.
Awesome. And Mike, you live in the Chicago area, so you've kind of been on the news lately. You got some people running around out there just running free, but we need to find more parks and more things for this youth to do, according to your according to the politicians.
Yeah, tell me about it. Right. As a matter of fact, I'm the K9 team lieutenant for the regional mobile field force in the Chicago metropolitan area, and already, we're blowing up on standby and requests for these takeovers coming up over the weekend. So I'm sure we're going to be busy.
Yeah. Hey, so again, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule. What can you tell us about what's going on in Idaho, and how is this going to affect the average canine handler out there that's working the beat?
Yeah, so the Idaho Supreme Court made a bad decision, as far as I'm concerned, March 20th of this year, in a case called State versus Dorf. And basically, I think when you really put it together, I think you could, this is kind of predictive. But they basically said that a dog touching the vehicle or intermeddling with the vehicle violates the common law trespass. And they're kind of using two of the cases, or at least the underpinning of the cases that I talk about in my classes. One of them is New York versus Class, Supreme Court decision, as well as another case that was decided in 2012, United States versus Jones. In the Class case, what happened is you got a police officer has a vehicle curbed on a traffic stop. He's trying to read the VIN plate from the exterior through the windshield, but there was a piece of paper that was covering the VIN plate, so the officer reaches his hand into the open driver's window, slides that piece of paper out of the way, and then reads the VIN plate from outside. And the Supreme Court said that the moment in time the officer's hand went into the driver's window, broke that threshold, there was a trespass into a constitutionally protected area. Now, in that case, they found that that was reasonable because that's what's required under the Fourth Amendment is, was the search reasonable? They found that it was. Then, with that undergirding and underpinning in place, they decided United States versus Jones, which has nothing to do with dogs, neither did Class. But in the Jones decision, you have DC Metro, as well as the FBI, go onto Jones's apartment parking lot. They slap a GPS device up underneath the Jones's Jeep, and then gather crime-related evidence as related to that. And when Jones moves to suppress that evidence, he claims that the officers committed a trespass to the vehicle, which was a search under the Fourth Amendment, where a warrant was required, and the Supreme Court agreed with that. And that's where we get our warrant requirement for GPS. But all of this is underpinned or undergirded by trespass. And this is predictable only because the courts, when they're looking at searches, there's two approaches that they take. One's a property approach, and the other one is a privacy-based approach. The property-based approach is based on, did the government trespass into a constitutionally protected area? And that's kind of what underpinned or undergirded the State versus Dorf decision that the Supreme Court of Idaho just recently decided. And they actually cite that pretty much right in their opening, United States versus Jones. And they also cite two recent cases that they decided, State versus Howard, which is a 2021 decision, and State versus Randall, which is a 2021 decision. And so that's which both were dog cases, which kind of undergird and started underpinning the decision in this case. So what we have is this dog comes up, is doing his regular thing around the vehicle on the free air sniff. They talk about how the dog got real close to the seams of the vehicle, how the dog put his nose into the wheel wells of the vehicle, and then eventually put his front paws up onto the vehicle, which they said was intermeddling with the vehicle or common law trespass. And so what they said is the moment in time that the dog intermeddled with the vehicle or trespassed upon that vehicle, that left the free air sniff, which is undergirded by two Supreme Court decisions, United States versus Place, 1983, and Illinois versus Cabellas, 2005. So they said that broke away from the free air sniff and went into a search under the Fourth Amendment. And of course, if we're going to be searching something under the Fourth Amendment, specifically an automobile, under the automobile exception doctrine, then we must have probable cause to do so. So because probable cause had not yet been established, at this particular point, they went ahead and suppressed the evidence. Now, I know what's going to happen here is we're going to have an industry here in the United States that's going to have a knee-jerk reaction to this, and everybody's going to be, all hot and bothered by this thing. there's only two cases that say this: State versus Dorf, Supreme Court of Idaho, and another case, United States versus Thomas, which is out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals 2013 decision. And in that case, that's a Border Patrol case. Almost the same thing happened here. You have Thomas coming through a border, stopped by the Border Patrol. He's got a pickup truck with one of those like toolboxes that kind of run along the back of the bed of the truck in between the cab and the bed. Dog comes along the side of the vehicle, sniff, 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 starts to show a little bit of change of behavior, puts his front paws again on the side of the truck, puts his nose right up onto that toolbox, and then goes down into the indication or final response, whatever term that you're using there. And the Ninth Circuit said that the moment in time the dog touched the vehicle with its paws, it was a trespass under the Fourth Amendment. Again, moving out of the free air sniff arena under place and cabeas and into a search without probable cause. Now, the saving grace in United States versus Thomas is that this is a 2013 decision. And again, they undergirded this or underpinned this decision by United States versus Jones, which we talked about, and then another case that was decided in the same year, Florida versus Jardines, which everybody, one of your listeners should be aware of. That would be the trespass or property-based trespass approach in somebody's curtilage at their front door. What saved this Thomas case is that Jardines and Jones had not yet been decided at the time that the sniff and Thomas took place. So what the court said is we're going to admit the evidence over the defense's objection under the good faith exception doctrine that's undergirded by United States versus Leon. So that's what saved that case. Now, from 2013 until 2023, if my math is correct, that is a decade, there has been no movement on that argument in the courts. As a matter of fact, there have been most of the courts that have even addressed this issue have completely rejected this issue of this common law trespass simply because the dog has incidental contact with the vehicle, or even that the dog broke the threshold of the vehicle because the court said that that breaking of the threshold following the odor into the vehicle was alert behavior, which established the probable cause to begin with. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So I don't want there to be this knee-jerk reaction, because right now the State versus Dorf case is confined to the state of Idaho, because the Idaho Supreme Court is only binding on other state courts within the state of Idaho. So outside of Idaho, this really doesn't have any application. Defendants, of course, could use this to as a persuasive authority case. In other words, they can use it to try to persuade the court that they're in front of to follow the same decision. But many of these courts already have standing binding precedent that this trespassery argument is been rejected. And actually, I got a couple cases here. I can let me just 1 second here. We've got the Third Circuit rejected that argument, United States versus Pierce. The Fourth Circuit rejected this argument in Varner versus Ronay. Sixth Circuit rejected it, United States versus Sharp. Eighth Circuit just rejected it, 2022. A very recent case, the United States versus Perez. The 10th Circuit has rejected it multiple times, United States versus Moore, United States versus Parada. Also a lower district court case in the 10th Circuit, the District of Kansas, in United States versus Anderson. And then we have a couple state courts that have rejected this argument also. State versus Breeding out of Alabama. Several California courts have rejected this. People versus Stillwell, People versus Terrell. Iowa's rejected it, State versus Arrieta. New Jersey's rejected it, State versus Balby. And then finally Texas in Taylor versus State. So these are all cases that, the courts have looked at this incidental contact, jumping through the windows, all that kind of stuff. And they've just rejected this argument. So I don't think we should have this knee-jerk reaction to this. if you're in the state of Idaho, that sucks for you. I'm sorry, but that's your Supreme Court. So
can we follow up on that a little bit, Mike? And
yeah.
let's talk about what the officers with canines in Idaho need to be doing now, how that affects them directly since it happened in their backyard.
Well, I think, in my opinion, take it for what it's worth. My opinion is, I think our handlers, our friends up there in Idaho, are going to have to kind of follow the mantra of our explosive detection dogs. Our explosive detection dogs, they're not permitted to touch the things that they're sniffing, or they shouldn't be, because the damn thing might explode on them. So we don't want that, right? Of course, our explosive detection dogs, once the damn dog does alert, doesn't take a big, huge tug toy out of their pocket and throw it and bounce it off of the area that the dog just alerted to. So I think they're going to have to kind of at least kind of I don't want to say retrain, but at least think about how they're doing these sniffs, keeping that dog away from the vehicle, and then this always brings up this discussion of we're back to probable cause again, right? Probable cause is this very low standard. Is there a fair probability that evidence or contraband of a crime will be located in the area to be searched? So all of the courts that have addressed this alerting issue, and so when we're talking about alerting, if you look at the scientific definition out of the Academy Standards Board ASB Technical Report 25, you guys can Google it. You can come to the website. We've got it up on our website also. Technical Report 25 is the actual, it's guidance from the scientific community to the court. Basically, it's an attempt to standardize the language and the terminology throughout our industry. And if you look at the definitions, there's a distinctive difference between alert and an indication or a trained final response. All right, indication and trained final response are similar enough that you could use them interchangeably, but I always recommend handlers pick one and stay with it. If you're going to use a trained final alert, use that. If you're going to use indication, use indication. Alert, on the other hand, is ongoing change of behavior, demonstrative. I'm adding that to that definition. Ongoing change of behavior that is interpreted by the handler when the dog gets into a trained odor. So these are, and I say demonstrative, and what I mean by that is this behavior change in the dog, if it's being looked at on a body cam, if it's being looked at on a dash cam video, whatever, anybody who's viewing this video would say something happened right there in that dog. There was some type of change of behavior, right? What that behavior changer means, according to ASB, and I agree with, is interpreted by the canine handler based on their training and experience, right? So if you're going to call an alert, which does establish probable cause, if you're going to call alert without an indication or trained final response, then you absolutely have to have shown that in your training records prior to this occurring, right? So it's so important for us to really document in our training records. And again, this is what the handler sees and hears, right? Because we all know the difference between and, right? So what I always recommend to handlers is, please, no trip hazards. You can have no trip hazards. Get a nice small little interior room of one of your buildings where you can get it completely black in that room, put an odor out in that room, no trip hazards. Handler has to go into the room with the dog and call the alert simply by listening to what the damn dog is doing, right? So you can document that into your training record, and then you can use that as part of your alert behavior when you're on the street. So that's one of the things, one of the biggest things that these defense witness experts are going to do if you're calling alert behavior is they're going to comb through your training records and say, well, where did you see that behavior prior? So getting back to Idaho, what they're going to need to do is they're going to need to articulate this alert behavior that establishes probable cause before this dog touches this vehicle. It's that's my opinion. I think that's kind of I just don't know any other way around that. I think that's just where it's going to be. So they're going to have to change. They're going to have to change some of their tactics on their detailed, if they're, just doing a cursory versus a detailed, or they're doing a cursory, then followed up by a detail. How are they going to do this? Probably the best recommendation is when that dog is coming up is, not directing that dog's nose up any higher than maybe waist high, so that the dog doesn't have this inclination to want to put their paws up onto the car in order to sniff it, because clearly the Supreme Court of Idaho at least decided that we have common law trespassery issues that change that dynamics from the sniff into a search. So I think they're going to have to. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Now, so you talked about the dog jumping on the car. What about if the handler touches the car and is presenting? Is that an issue? Is that going to be a trespass as well at this point? Similar to putting the tracker on the vehicle.
Well, I can't say for certain. That's not exactly what the Supreme Court necessarily said in Idaho on this, but I think that's going to be an argument based. And
Sure.
I think if that issue comes up before the Idaho Supreme Court, and then they follow their precedent in the State versus Dorf case, I think that's a strong argument. I think that the Idaho Supreme Court could find that is a trespass to the vehicle into a constitutionally protected area, and undergirded or underpin that decision with the State versus Dorf. I think that's plausible at this particular point. Yeah.
So, handlers out there listening to this, number one, and we've been teaching our handlers not to touch the car anyway. It's just good practices in training not to put your odor on the car and let the dog actually do the independent sniff itself. Number two, Mike, you bring up a great point, and that is there's a difference between an alert and what we call a final indication. The alert is physiological. The dog isn't controlling it. He's not making a conscious decision to do it. It's just been kind of classically conditioned. When he hits his odor, this is how he reacts. And handlers, if you have not been putting what your dog specifically does, then you're really missing the boat, because when your dog does give you an alert, then you have not documented it to the courts previously, and now they're just going based upon, you can't go into court and go, well, this is what my dog does when he hits the target odor. This is the change of behavior.
How do you know?
Yeah, well, because this is what he always does. Okay, is that written anywhere?
Right.
No. Okay, you're now having the credibility issue, and your case is much stronger if you go, well, yeah, I've documented it in my training records that, his breathing changes, his tail goes up, he stiffens, he becomes more intent, his head goes back and forth quickly. Like whatever your dog does, make sure you are articulating that in your training records, so that when you put that in the report, now you've got some foundation and some basis that, yeah, this is actually what he does. So, and that's going to become more and more important, because whether you live in Idaho or not, the ability to show your dog hit odor before he touched the vehicle or before he jumps into the vehicle, that's going to be, I think, key for us in this industry.
And Mike, to clarify, what level of a touch by the dog is considered a problem? Like, is it nose touching the vehicle? Is it like you were talking before about the wheel well? Like, is there a demarcation line that, like, you go past this and it's a violation?
So
Curtilage of the vehicle.
Yeah, right. So interestingly enough, I thought it was really interesting that the Supreme Court of Idaho, in rendering this opinion, made some, I think, points to say that this dog's nose came very close to the seams, that this dog's nose entered into the wheel well. But in the end, the way that I think it's ultimately written, based on my reading of it, is that the trespass occurred when the dog's paws actually touched the vehicle. But those other kind of comments in the opinion, I'll be honest with you, really concern me. But in the end, they did say that it was the paws on the vehicle that was the trespass of the vehicle. But they certainly brought those issues up, and there's no denying that the Supreme Court really did at least take notice of that.
And for those guys that are out there worried right now, what's the pathway before this hits the actual Supreme Court to be argued?
Well, it would have. I don't. It would have to. The state of Idaho would have to file a writ of certiorari at this point directly to the Supreme Court of the United States, and then it would be up to the Supreme Court to either grant the writ or deny the writ to see if they even want to even render an opinion on this issue. And gosh, I wouldn't even want to take a guess at this point. And this is a strategic opinion. This is a strategic matter as to what they want to do. I mean, if the state of Idaho ultimately files a writ, and the Supreme Court decides to take this, I think I wouldn't want that as a matter. Let's just keep this, in my opinion, let's keep this contained to the state of Idaho and leave it there because, I mean, we really ran a gamble on the Illinois versus Kmiecik case because that was confined to the state of Illinois. And in that case, you had an Illinois state trooper run an interdiction, curbs a vehicle on a traffic just outside Chicago on Interstate 57. Another dog handler, Illinois state trooper, nearby hears that traffic stop over the radio, goes to the scene, runs his dog during the ordinary inquiries and ministerial tasks process of the traffic stop. Dog alerts, and then they search and get marijuana. Anyways, as it works its way up through the Illinois courts, gets to the Illinois Supreme Court, People versus Kmiecik, and the Illinois Supreme Court said that, when you deploy a dog pursuant to a regular ordinary traffic stop, that's unconstitutional. You would need reasonable suspicion because it changes the context of the traffic encounter from traffic investigation to a drug investigation requiring reasonable suspicion. So the Illinois Attorney General took, rolled the dice to see if this was going to pass constitutional muster in front of the Supreme Court of the United States, and luckily it did go in our favor. And I think there was a lot more. There was already a case that kind of underpinned or undergirded the free air sniff, which is United States versus Place. So I think we had some good standing there. Honestly, I don't know that our justices on the Supreme Court will not use New York versus Class and United States versus Jones in their prior rulings to say, this is in fact a search. It does take it out of the free air sniff. I'm not convinced that wouldn't happen. So, I would prefer, I'd prefer this just to stay where it's at right now and not jump, but that's the pathway that they'd have to move in order to get that.
A lot of things are changing.
Yeah. And you know what? Things have been changing. And again, this is where we go back to your training needs to change as well. So the days of walking backwards and touching the car and presenting, we started to abandon that back when the whole queuing thing came in and Clever Hans, and we've talked about that in previous podcasts. But, really letting the dog do the sniff, you can dictate where your dog sniffs through training by hide placement and making sure that the dog already understands where odor typically comes from, where it typically he's getting rewarded, and let the dog do their thing without getting overly involved. And so, and again, to hit it home again, guys, documentation on your training records, and then writing a good report. Making sure you're articulating that if your dog has that alert, like articulating what that alert is and, how your dog behaved before he hits that seam or whatever. So, and a lot of this stuff, Mike, you could probably attest to it. It seems like our report writing kind of gets us in trouble and takes us down these paths that we don't really need to go.
We suck at report writing. That's
terrible.
The number one issue. And you know what? When, the three of us started in law enforcement, we were taught, saw drunk, arrested same, and that was good enough because when we got up and testified, everybody just believed us. But now things have gone. The pendulum has swung so far to the other direction. We're tied to our report. We're tied to our training records. So if it's not in there, it never happened. And for guys who are having some issues about, being able to read the behavior or see some of these things, get a GoPro. have somebody videotape your training so that you can go back and watch and see, okay, oh, my dog did this here, my dog did this here, my dog did this here, and then be able to get those documented into your training records. I think that's just absolutely crucial. But
yeah,
I like
that.
that.
It's also a little important to pass the live PD test, right? Like if you,
We've seen some things.
definitely seen some.
Yeah,
Trying to
right.
forget them. But the other thing that you brought up that I want to hit on is I really like your get in the dark with your dog and listen, because often we're detailing what we see, but are we detailing in our reports or our training records what we're hearing as well? So
I had a dog, one of my first dogs that I worked. He had that telltale sign, man. He'd come up, we had the open mouth breathing, then he'd go into the closed mouth sniffing, and then just before he would go into his trained final response, whether it was present or not, he would clear his nose, right? So he'd come in and he'd go, right, and I knew immediately right then and there that was it, because that happened every single time. And so just documenting something like that, just as simple as that, man, like that is golden there, but it's got to be documented. If it's not, I'm telling you, these expert witnesses will come in and destroy you on that. So we don't want to see that happening.
So taking this a step further and into another realm, fentanyl. A lot of things going on with fentanyl out there in the detection world. Whether or not we're going to teach dogs to alert to it. Is it something that a dog can alert to because it potentially can be prescribed? There's a lot of things, and it's dangerous as hell, right? Like, I mean, all those things coming together are changing how we deal with fentanyl. Can you talk about that and what's happening nationwide?
Yeah, I think there's a huge push through our agencies and our politicians. Fentanyl is prevalent. It's killing people. It's killing a lot of Americans. So we're seeing a big push now. Get these dogs trained up on fentanyl. And so the number one issue is, well, fentanyl isn't necessarily contraband in all circumstances. So the question is, if we, and I'll use this term, imprint, I'm using air quotes here, but we're just saying that's an industry term that people understand. So we'll just use that.
We get it.
Yeah.
Right. So we're imprinting this dog on the odor of fentanyl, right? So if we do that, are we training a dog on a non-contraband item? So my number one advice to our handlers out there is contact your local prosecutor's office first and foremost and get their opinion, because there is legitimate reasons why somebody might, of course, have fentanyl in their possession, through prescription or something like that. And about a year ago, I got an email from a large Southern California agency, we won't mention their names, bringing this very topic up. And so I reached out, sent this out to, I have a list of experts that I keep throughout the United States, trainers, expert witnesses, attorneys, and I sent this out, and I got kind of this feedback from all over. And the actual local prosecutor from this large Southern California agency kind of weighed in on it also. And their opinion was, listen, we believe that the number of people who could lawfully possess fentanyl in the first place is such a small percentage of the population that a dog trained, imprinted on the odor of marijuana or fentanyl would still be a basis for probable cause. They would at least make that argument that it was still a basis for probable cause. So check with your local prosecutors. They need to know what the issues are that are related to it, and then get their determination. I mean, if the local prosecutor says, "Hey, we're not going to prosecute these cases if your dog's trained," then why do it? Because you're not going to gain anything from it at that point. But if they are, the next question is, well, what's the procedures? What's the steps? How can we do this in a safe manner, right? And then we get into this discussion about real odor versus pseudo or mimics and things like that. I'm just going to say this: I'm not anti-pseudo, anti-mimic, whatever your terminology is there, for training purposes. And the reason I say I'm not anti, because there's no case law out there that says that that's really addressed the topic. There's a couple cases that reference that the dog was trained with pseudo, but it was never really an
Interesting.
argument. Yeah, it wasn't really an argument in the case, so
Yeah.
the courts haven't really addressed it. So, but the scientific community, our ASB, our Academy Standards Board, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and our ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, the scientists that are within those groups really have said that, at least for testing or certification purposes, that it should be real odor. And then the problem is now we don't really have I guess, a real good definition as to what real
What's
odor
real
is.
odor is, yeah.
Because some of the agencies, some of the, I should say, certifying bodies are trying to write some certification standards for fentanyl. And one of the agencies or associations, their suggestion is to use a training aid delivery device with a fentanyl soak. So it's kind of up in that headspace. It's got the odor on there, and to use that. So therefore, it's safe. It's in this training aid delivery device. It's safe to the handler. It's safe to the dog. So you have that kind of stuff. So it's going to have to be a procedural stuff. Then we have agencies out there that said, "Oh, we've been trained on fentanyl. We're using fentanyl pills. It's laboratory tested. It's 85% pure fentanyl." Okay, well, here's the next question, and I'm really interested as to why this has become an issue in fentanyl and not cocaine, heroin, or any of the other drugs that we've done. But then the question is, well, what's the other 15% of
Yeah,
that?
what are they hitting on the binders, and is that going
Yeah, exactly.
cross over to other prescription drugs?
Yeah, exactly. And so actually this agency had shipped their training aids out to one of the labs, tested it all for free for them, and then gave them back the laboratory results and gave them what the 15% was.
So they can
And
proof off of it. Is that what they were using it for, to proof off?
yep, they put their dogs on those, and guess what? Those dogs were alerting to those.
Yeah,
those
I'm not
odors.
sure that's the
So,
most efficient way, right? So it's like if you can just isolate that one ingredient, or that isolate the odor, so you're just kind of sticking with the fentanyl. I think obviously you're going to be probably better off.
Yeah,
'cause it seems like it's a
absolutely.
pretty reasonable argument if every narcotic or most narcotics that are prescribed or using the same binders, it wouldn't take long before you had a dog that was alerting to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Everything.
and they're
Mike,
common.
go ahead.
They're common. They're always in there. It's like dogs are going to start self imprinting on these odors, just like dogs that aren't trained in marijuana.
End up
We're
self-imprinting
finding,
on
yeah,
them.
they're
Yeah.
self imprinting on them. So
Yeah,
It's probably
So-
happening with fentanyl right now.
Yeah, so
because there's fentanyl found
Yeah,
in
yeah.
everywhere.
Actually, we have dogs hitting on fentanyl now, right? Because of that.
So there's a large metropolitan agency in the Midwest. They do a lot of parcel interdictions. I think, in Mike's opinion, it's the best parcel interdiction team that we have in the United States. And that's what they found. They found they work exclusively at a FedEx facility, that their dogs self-imprinted on fentanyl. And so what this trainer did is actually went out and trained and certified their dogs on, and I'll just say it because it's a reputable company, is Precision Explosives they use. They have a new fentanyl odor out. And so he trained and imprinted all his dogs on that, certified on them, and we had the discussion about it. And he said they are just rocking it. I mean, they are killing their number of fentanyl seizures out there. So I'm not opposed to that. It's just a matter of that procedural. So number one, check with the prosecutor. Number two, then what is the procedural steps to get these dogs trained on the odor fentanyl, if your prosecutor is willing to make the argument, and then how are we going to certify them on? There's the association's got to catch up now, and I think the West Coast is probably where you guys are. I'm going to give you guys accolades for once. I think you guys are ahead of the game, at least on this issue.
Yeah, and guys out there that with your dogs, you should be doing this anyway. Before you go out there and do a sniff with your dog, obviously, like if you're going to search inside of a vehicle, do a cursory check, like visually check to make sure there isn't anything. And you should be doing this for, sharp objects, or if there's any any fentanyl that's in the open, right? And I know this sounds basic, but again, this podcast is directed to every handler in the United States. If I get called to go in to search a residence, I'm going to walk through to see if there's any hazards, or is there any drugs that he can actually put his nose on, right? Because especially if you're going to be imprinting these odors or conditioning your dog to these odors, whatever terminology we want, make sure that that's harmful to the dog. And the other thing, Mike, I was trying to find out how many deaths have been attributed to fentanyl with canines out there, and we could not find any statistics, and or if anybody had to Narcan their dog to come back if they've actually ingested fentanyl or anything like that. Do you have any information on that at all, as to like if there's how many dogs have been affected by fentanyl, if any?
Good. They know what that is a great question. I don't have an answer. I don't have any statistics on that. I have heard anecdotally from certain people who have been in my class, one or two that said that they Narcan their dogs, and that their dog wound up pulling through, not having an issue. But that's anecdotally.
Yeah. And then you wonder, is it the CPR that was given to the guy that did need CPR that survived?
Yeah, right.
or did the dog actually need it? And so listeners out there, if you guys are listening to this and you have an actual case, or if there's been dogs that have passed away, please shoot us an email on that.
I don't know if I told you, but I reached out to Michelle Mon, and she told me to reach out to Dr. DeGrief, and that there was some information out there, but it sounds like the numbers are
very vague,
extraordinarily low.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that Dr. DeGrief would probably be a really good resource there. I agree.
Yeah, I remember the numbers being like between 1 and 3.
Yeah, it was
is what I've heard, which is pretty ambiguous as it is. But
we're gonna have Dr. DeGrief on in the future, but Gregg and I are so damn dumb that we're both nervous as hell to have her on and have to talk.
Well, I've only understood half the words you've said so far, Mike, so that's actually pretty good.
Okay, well, I only understand about a quarter of the words that Dr. DeGrief says, so she is so fascinating, though. I had the absolute honor and pleasure to sit in her class at CNCA, and then I had a great just conversation with her in the hotel lobby, and man, she is just so smart, and what a asset she is to our community. So that'll be a great interview.
Awesome.
That's the pot calling the kettle black right there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't know. No, I don't know about that. I appreciate it though, but I don't know.
That's a lot of good information.
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
For the Idaho guys and gals that are out there running dogs right now, obviously they've got a lot to deal with, and I think it's clarifying for us because I was on LEO K9 the other day looking, and there was a lot of questions like, oh, what are we going to do? And does it apply to the Ninth Circuit as a whole? Is it just an Idaho thing? So I think that's good to clarify that, because even we were like, all right, like what's this going to do to us, and how are we going to need to change things up here? So it's good to understand that that's just an Idaho thing. Sorry, Idaho, and that it's not applying across the board. But I think we can clean some things up on detection anyway, as far as touching the car and doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree 100%. For you guys in California, you actually because you guys do have 2 cases directly on point that rejected that argument. So, but at the same point, I cannot disagree with you. I mean, we can modernize some of the things that we're doing here. Some of what we're doing is a little antiquated, and we can certainly modernize that.
Sure. Awesome, Mike. Well, what do you got coming up? Anything you want to put out there for our listeners?
Oh my gosh, we are swamped. We have some good stuff coming up. I'm going to be up at Blue Line up in Pennsylvania coming up early May. I'm done for this month, thank God. Going to be up in Georgetown, Texas in May, doing a supervisor and a patrol narcotic course there. Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office up in Wisconsin. That's going to be in May also, which is good because the last time I was in Wisconsin, it snowed from the time I left the state of Illinois. I was never so happy to get myself back to Chicago because it snowed for the 2 days that I was up there. We're going to be up in Ohio, first time up in Ohio, Marion area in June. And so that's going to be exciting. And then Pennsylvania in August. And then it kind of goes from there. If you guys are looking for information, on canine case law. You can always go to our website, which is sheepdogguardian.com, or if you're interested in hosting a seminar or attending a seminar, we're pretty easy to work with. Just reach out through our website. There's a general contact button up there. Go right into Jen. Jen handles all of my scheduling for me. So yeah, that's what we got going on. I appreciate you guys giving me a little bit of time to talk about that.
Yeah, and if you're like Rich and I out there and you're listening, like you read these cases and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I'm not even sure what that means.
I only read conclusions.
You can that's what I'm saying. You can be a member on Sheepdog Guardian. I think it's $50 a year, and Mike does all that stuff for you. And trust me, it's like $50 well spent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If you're a member of certain associations, NNDDA, USPCA, we do give you, I know I'm missing somebody. I should have gotten down that road. I apologize for whoever it is I'm missing. IPWATA, you get a half off membership there. So it's $25 for the year.
Well,
so
cheap. Awesome. All right,
Mike,
brother. Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.
All right, thanks guys very much. Thank you guys for what you do, because you guys are great assets to our industry. So thank you very much, and it's appreciated. You guys put out some really good information. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
Thanks. Do us a favor. Don't hang up yet. It's we're going to say goodbye, but we need you to hang on for a second.
Yep. So till next time,
train hard.
Be safe.